Chapter 6 Photosynthesis 6.1 Introduction to Photosynthesis. Here are the three main learning outcomes. First is to state the overall reaction for photosynthesis. Second, to discover the structure of chloroplast in relation to the stages of photosynthesis. And thirdly, to state the two stages of photosynthesis, which are light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction. First, the definition of photosynthesis. So what is photosynthesis? It is the chemical process by which green plants or other photosynthetic organisms that synthesize organic compounds such as carbohydrates, including sugar, from carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight or light energy as the energy source. So basically, what photosynthesis does is, it is a process that converts the light energy into chemical energy that is stored in the form of carbohydrate, for example, sugar or glucose. As I mentioned earlier, photosynthesis does not only occur in green plants, but also occur in any photosynthetic organism that includes algae, unicellular protists, such as euglena, as well as photosynthetic bacteria such as cyanobacteria. So this is the chemical equation for photosynthesis. So during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide will react with water in the presence of light energy as the energy source to produce glucose and oxygen. So when writing the chemical equation, it is very important that you write down the name of the chemicals that you have written, as well as to label the arrow with chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the main photosynthetic pigment. Without chlorophyll, the process of photosynthesis cannot occur because we need chlorophyll to absorb the light energy. Okay, the second version of the chemical reaction is basically the same as the first chemical reaction. The only difference is the number of the water molecules. So actually, when photosynthesis occurs, the process will require water as reactant, as well as will produce water as one of the products. So for photosynthesis to occur, we need 12 water that will produce 6 water. If we simplify this equation, we can cancel out the second water, the production of water, and reduce the number of water that required as a reactant to 6 water only. And we will get the first chemical reaction. So from that we know the first equation and the second equation is actually the same. It's just that the first chemical equation is the simplified version of the full chemical equation for photosynthesis. So in the exam, you can either write down the first or the second version of the chemical equation, it doesn't matter. Next, the structure of chloroplast. You have learned about the structure of chloroplast since last semester, so this is just a revision. So the chloroplasts have two membranes, the inner and outer membrane. In between the membrane, there is intermembrane space. Inside the inner membrane, there are space called stroma, and inside the stroma, there are many discs called thylakoid. In addition to that, chloroplasts also have their own ribosome as well as their own circular DNA. Chloroplasts are mainly found inside the mesophyll cell of the leaves. Each mesophyll cell will have about 30 to 40 chloroplasts. In addition, the thylakoids will contain many chlorophyll, which is a type of photosynthetic pigments to trap light energy for photosynthesis to occur. Next, we will look further at the different types of photosynthetic pigment that can be found on the thylakoid membrane or the thylakoid disc. Generally, there are two main types of photosynthetic pigment. The first one is chlorophyll, the second one is carotenoid. So chlorophyll, there are two types, either chlorophyll A or chlorophyll B. Carotenoids can be further divided into three different types: xanthophyll, keratin, as well as phaeophytin. So all of these different pigments involved in photosynthesis process. Next is the stages of photosynthesis. So there are two stages of photosynthesis, either light-dependent reaction or light-independent reaction, also known as the Kelvin cycle. So light-dependent reaction takes place on the thylakoid membrane, while the Kelvin cycle, the light-independent reaction, takes place inside the stroma of chloroplast. So here we can see the relationship between the light-dependent reaction as well as the light-independent reaction of the photosynthesis, also known as the Kelvin cycle. So on the thylakoid membrane, during light-dependent reaction, light energy will be used to convert water into oxygen as well as producing ATP and NADPH. Next, during Kelvin cycle, ATP and NADPH will be used to convert CO2 into carbohydrate. This process will regenerate ADP and NADP+. So we can see that the product of Kelvin cycle, which is NADP+ and ADP, is the reactant involved in light-dependent reaction. Similarly, the product of the light-dependent reaction will act as reactants for the light-independent reaction or the Kelvin cycle. So overall, without light-dependent reaction, light-independent reaction or Kelvin cycle cannot occur. Without Kelvin cycle, the light-dependent reaction also will not occur. So we can see that the two stages of photosynthesis are dependent on one another for the process of photosynthesis to occur. Next, we will look into the enzymes as well as the structure involved in light-dependent reaction. So as I mentioned earlier, the light-dependent reaction occur on the thylakoid membrane. So this is the thylakoid membrane. So on the thylakoid membrane, there are many proteins as well as enzymes. There are photosystem 2, electron transport chain, photosystem 1, another electron transport chain, and NADP+ reductase, which is the enzyme. So all of these protein and enzymes are located on the thylakoid membrane. First, we look at the structure of photosystem 2 or PS2. The PS2 can be divided into two main components. So the first one is the reaction center. So this is the reaction center. The second component is the light harvesting complex. So the yellow structure is the light harvesting complex. Inside the reaction center, there are two main components. The first one is the primary electron acceptor. So this is the primary electron acceptor. The second component of the reaction center is chlorophyll A P680. So here we can see there are actually two chlorophyll A that we call P680. Next, for the light harvesting complex, it contains accessory pigments, which are the carotenoids as well as chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. So overall, the photosystem will have two main components, which are the reaction center and the light harvesting complex. The reaction center can be divided into two more components, which are the primary electron acceptor and the reaction center chlorophyll A, a pair of chlorophyll A called P680. Secondly is the light harvesting complex. Inside the light harvesting complex, we can find many accessory pigments, also known as the carotenoids, and chlorophyll A and B. For photosystem 1 or PS1, it also has similar structure as the PS2. The only difference is the reaction center chlorophyll is P700. it is still made up of a pair of chlorophyll A, but now the chlorophyll A is called P700. All the other components are the same with PS2. So, what is the difference between PS1 and PS2? The only difference is in terms of the wavelength of light that is absorbed by the chlorophyll A located inside the reaction center. So for PS2, the chlorophyll A will absorb the light wavelength of 680 nanometer. So this is why the chlorophyll A is called P680. In contrast, for chlorophyll A found in the reaction center of PS1, it is able to absorb light at the wavelength of 700 nanometer. That's why it is called P700. So this is the only difference between PS1 and PS2. The other components are exactly the same between the two types of photosystem. Next component is the electron transport chain. So for the electron transport chain found between the PS2 and the PS1, so it contains plastoquinone or PQ, cytochrome complexes, and plastocyanin PC. So the second ETC is found after the PS1. So this ETC only contains ferredoxin. There is no cytochrome complexes. The last component is an enzyme called NADP+ reductase. As the name suggests, this enzyme will involve in a reduction reaction that reduces NADP+ molecule into NADPH. That's it for 6.1 Introduction to Photosynthesis.